There are 7 words so simple, yet so powerful they can bend the laws of fortune itself. I did not hear them in a cathedral or a bank. I learned them while the world was shivering. Picture the winter breath of the Great Depression frosting the tenement windows of New York, where men in heavy coats stood in bread lines and women counted coins as if each one were a prayer bead. I was a young man then, thin as a whisper, walking streets that echoed with the clatter of worry. My pockets were almost empty, but what troubled me most was not the lack of money. It was the belief that money had the final word. That night, with snow turning the city into a silent cathedral, I climbed a narrow stairwell to a dimly lit room where a lantern threw honey-colored light on a small circle of seekers. There, in the hush between heartbeats, the first of the 7 words found me. I did not yet know that declarations are not speeches to the world, they are consecrations to the soul. I did not yet know that wealth is not a deposit to be earned but a decree to be embodied. What I knew was hunger, for food, for meaning, for a way out of the iron cage of circumstance. And then I felt it, the strange electric certainty that reality is pliable when addressed in the right tongue. The room smelled faintly of incense and cold air. Someone closed the window, a wooden floor creaked, and the life I had been living, the anxious tallying, the scrambling, the fear, began to loosen like a knot under warm water. You might imagine that my fortunes changed because the market turned, because some benefactor appeared, because I found a method for making money that others had missed. You would be wrong. What changed was the author of my inner script. I discovered 7 declarations, not slogans, not superstitions, 7 living tones that, when sounded in the chamber of the subconscious, reorder the very stage upon which your life unfolds. Say them as a beggar and nothing happens. Say them as truth and everything that once seemed fixed begins to move. I want you to understand this at the marrow. Luck had nothing to do with what followed. Law did. The same law that draws planets in their orbits. The same law that pulls the tide to the moon. The same law that turns a seed toward the sun even in the darkness of soil. When spoken with feeling, these 7 declarations visit the subconscious as seed ideas. The soil does not debate the seed. It multiplies it. Quietly, faithfully, relentlessly. I will tell you how a man with frost in his beard and worry in his chest learned to breathe in a new rhythm, how a pauper's self-image melted and reformed into a steward of immense prosperity, how the world, which once looked like a locked iron gate, swung open as if it had been waiting for me to arrive. I will tell you how contracts found me, how doors I had never noticed revealed themselves, how strangers spoke my name as if they had been rehearsing it, not because I forced the world to bend, but because I learned to speak to the divine within me, and the world simply answered. If you listen closely, you will feel it too, that subtle shift in the air, that quickening in your chest. It is not the sound of money counting itself, it is the sound of your deeper mind remembering its authority. The 7 words are simple, almost childlike. So simple that arrogance will overlook them, and only those with the humility to feel will hear their thunder. They are not shouted, they are not scattered like confetti. They are placed like gems in velvet, one by one, into the treasury of your inner life. Before we begin, allow this moment to be a covenant. Place your hand softly over your heart. Breathe as if your breath were a tide returning to shore, and notice the quiet power awake within you. There is no barrier between your desire and its fulfillment, but the story you permit yourself to believe. Tonight we change the story. Tonight, I hand you the 7 declarations that turned a man the world called ordinary into a multi-billionaire. Not by accident, not by cleverness, but by alignment with the law of the subconscious, which is the law of God in you. If this truth already hums in your spirit, let the universe hear your consent. Before we begin, write in the comments, "I'm ready for abundance." Let those words be the first soft note of a symphony that will not stop until your life sings in harmony with your highest vision. Now draw closer. The lantern is lit, the city is hushed, and the first declaration waits at the threshold like dawn at the edge of night. The year was 1931, and New York had become a city of ghosts. Factories shuttered, banks collapsed. Men who once wore tailored suits now sold apples on the street corners. Dreams, once luminous and defiant, hung limp like forgotten flags in the wind. I was living in a boarding room on 110th Street, a narrow cell of peeling wallpaper where the radiator coughed and the floor groaned like an old man. Each night I would place a crust of bread on the windowsill, not to cool it but to pretend it was enough. My body was starving, yes, but the deeper hunger was spiritual. I was famished for meaning, for understanding, for a reason why some souls, even in the darkest night, seemed surrounded by an invisible light, while others, like me, wandered lost in the fog of circumstance. It was in that season of despair that I first heard the name Abdullah. They said he was unlike any man they'd ever met, a scholar wrapped in mystery. Some called him a mystic, others a magician. Those who mocked him eventually fell silent, for their laughter had a strange way of returning to them as misfortune. I remember the night I first climbed those narrow stairs to his apartment. The hallway smelled of sandalwood and something else, something older, like the scent of ancient parchment and incense left burning in a forgotten temple. I hesitated at the door, feeling the absurdity of it all. A destitute man seeking secrets of wealth from a stranger rumored to speak with unseen worlds. But when the door opened, my doubt dissolved. He stood there, tall, dark as mahogany polished by time, eyes burning with the calm intensity of someone who had seen beyond life's surface. His presence was disarming. He didn't greet me with words. He simply looked at me, through me, and smiled. "You're 6 months late," he said softly. "The brothers told me you would come." My throat tightened. I had never seen this man before. I had told no one of my intention to visit, yet he spoke as though I had been expected. In that moment something ancient stirred in me, the sense that life itself had orchestrated this meeting. Every loss, every sleepless night, every empty stomach had been leading me here, to this quiet room where reality itself seemed thinner. He gestured for me to sit. His room was lined with books, thick volumes with gilded edges, their titles written in languages I could not read. There was a single window, overlooking Harlem, where the lights of the city blinked like distant stars in the mist. For a while he said nothing, he only watched me. The silence felt heavy, alive, as though the air itself waited for his words. Finally he spoke. "You think your problem is money," he said. "But it is not. Your problem is forgetfulness." "Forgetfulness?" I echoed. "Yes," he said. "You have forgotten who you are." I frowned, unsure whether to feel offended or intrigued. He leaned forward slightly. "The poor man," he continued, "is not poor because the world is unfair. He is poor because he believes in poverty more than he believes in law. The universe is law, Joseph, and you are the law made flesh. Every word you speak into yourself becomes a command to creation." He paused. "You have spoken against yourself for too long." His voice wasn't reprimanding, it was compassionate yet absolute. I wanted to argue, to explain that I wasn't to blame for the depression, for the lost jobs, for the closed theaters. But something in his gaze silenced me. He rose and crossed the room to a wooden chest. From it, he drew a small piece of parchment covered in intricate writing. "These are the 7 divine decrees," he said. "They are not spells, not affirmations. They are keys, living frequencies that unlock the power already dwelling in you. But they must be spoken with understanding, not as the voice of man, but as the voice of God through man." I remember my pulse quickening. He held the parchment as if it were sacred scripture. "You will not speak them aloud," he instructed. "You will whisper them within to the infinite that listens in silence. Each declaration corresponds to a gate within your consciousness. As you move through them, your world will begin to rearrange itself. But you must speak them not as requests, not as hopes, but as decrees, as though they were already true." He looked at me again. "Can you do that?" I nodded, though part of me trembled. "Then understand this," he said. "The world you see is not fixed. It is a mirror, showing you what you secretly decree about yourself. You are the cause, not the effect. Change the cause, and the reflection will bow to you." He handed me the parchment. 7 lines. Simple phrases that glowed like embers in my mind. He did not explain them. He only said their meaning will reveal itself when your heart is quiet enough to hear. I left his home that night with the paper folded in my coat pocket. Though it felt heavier than gold, outside snow was falling again. Soft, quiet, infinite. The city was the same. And yet it wasn't. The streets still groaned under the weight of hunger and despair. But I walked among them as one who had glimpsed a secret. For the first time I felt that wealth was not something to chase, but something to awaken. A sleeping giant buried in the corridors of my own soul. Days passed. I would sit by my window repeating the first declaration silently in the half-light before sleep, not knowing if I was doing it right, only sensing that something within me was listening. The world around me seemed unchanged, but I could feel a subtle shift like the ocean drawing breath before the tide turns. One evening, as I watched the city lights flicker in the mist, I heard Abdullah's words echo in my mind. You are the law made flesh. And I understood these 7 declarations were not about money at all, they were stages of remembrance. Each one peeled back another layer of illusion, revealing what had always been true: that the mind is divine, that thought is creative, that feeling is command. Wealth, I began to see, was not accumulation, it was recognition, and those who mastered recognition became, inevitably, masters of circumstance. I would not yet realize it then, but each declaration marked a gate, 7 thresholds of awakening. From belief to knowing, from fear to faith, from begging to commanding. Each one would test me, reshape me, and reveal a new dimension of power sleeping within my subconscious. What began as a lesson in prosperity would become a pilgrimage into the nature of God itself. Not the God of heaven, but the God that breathes through you even now as you listen to these words. And so the journey began, not in wealth but in wonder, not in having but in remembering. Not with 7 words of ambition, but with 7 declarations of truth. Each would speak to a forgotten chamber of the soul, each would awaken a sleeping law, and each would draw me closer to the realization that would one day make me, in the eyes of the world, a multi-billionaire, but in the eyes of the divine, merely a man who finally remembered his inheritance. And so the parchment lay before me, 7 lines that shimmered faintly in the lamplight, as if alive. I didn't yet understand their meaning, but I could feel them, like a pulse beneath the surface of words, a rhythm that spoke to something ancient within me. Abdullah said nothing more, he only nodded, and in that silence I knew these were not prayers to be recited, but commands to be remembered. Each declaration was a door, a stage of awakening through which my consciousness would pass. 7 simple truths that would unmake the man I thought I was and reveal the power I had always been. That night, as I walked back through the frozen streets, I whispered the first of them under my breath, and the world began to change. The first declaration came to me on a night of bitter wind and empty cupboards. I had spent the last of my coins on a bowl of soup that was more water than nourishment. The streets outside were glazed with ice, and the city had the silence of surrender. Every man I passed seemed to carry the same weight, the look of one who had lost faith in tomorrow. When I returned to my narrow room, I lit the lamp and unfolded the parchment Abdullah had given me. The letters seemed to breathe. I placed my hand upon the first line, and though I could barely read through the haze of exhaustion, the words seemed to speak themselves inside me. The source of my wealth is within me. I read it again, slower this time. At first it felt absurd. How could that possibly be true? My pockets were empty, my landlord impatient, and my shoes worn to their bones. If the source of wealth was within me, it was a cruel joke. But something in Abdullah's gaze echoed in my mind. You have forgotten who you are. I closed my eyes. The room fell silent except for the hum of the city far below. 1,000 dreams gasping for breath. I took a slow breath and whispered the words again, but this time not as a complaint, not as a plea, but as if speaking to the infinite itself. The source of my wealth is within me. A strange calm washed over me. It wasn't comfort. It was recognition, the faintest memory of something ancient and true. I saw, in my mind's eye, a river flowing beneath the surface of the earth, silent, hidden, but endless. All my life I had been running along dry banks begging for rain, while beneath my feet that river had been flowing all along. That night I understood the world is not the source, it is the mirror. Money, opportunity, success, they are reflections, not causes. The real cause lives within, in the images you hold, in the feelings you permit to take root in the garden of your subconscious. Abdullah's voice returned to me as if carried by the wind. Stop chasing shadows, Joseph. Turn inward and light the lamp. I began a nightly ritual. Before sleep, when the mind softens and the gates to the subconscious stand open, I would lie still and whisper that single truth in silence. I didn't demand proof. I didn't plead. I simply acknowledged what was already written into the fabric of existence, and something began to stir. The next morning, the world looked the same, but I didn't. The air seemed fuller, alive. The cold no longer bit as sharply. I walked through the city as though I belonged to it, as though I carried something it had forgotten. People looked at me differently, not with pity but with curiosity, as if they felt the vibration of a new certainty that even I didn't yet understand. Within a week, The first sign appeared. A man I barely knew from the church approached me after service. "I don't know why," he said, "but I feel you could help with a small lecture I'm organizing on metaphysics. Would you be interested?" At the time, I had no proper attire, no reputation, no credentials, only the conviction that something within me had awakened. I accepted. The modest payment I received covered my rent for the month. But the true reward wasn't money. It was confirmation. The river had begun to move. That simple event was followed by another, and then another. A student recommended me for a teaching position. A publisher asked if I had ever considered writing my thoughts. Letters arrived from strangers thanking me for words I didn't remember saying. The flow of life that had seemed dammed began to run clear again. And I realized I hadn't created anything new. I had only removed the obstruction of disbelief. You see, the subconscious mind, that vast silent intelligence within you, is like fertile soil. It doesn't question the seed you plant, it multiplies it. When you declare that the source of your wealth is within, you are planting a seed of sovereignty. You are telling your subconscious that the external world has no power over your supply, that it is merely a conduit through which your inner state expresses itself. Once that truth takes root, the universe organizes itself to reflect it. Opportunities arrive not because you chase them, but because they are drawn to their corresponding vibration within you. Each morning I would rise and say it silently as the first act of the day: "The source of my wealth is within me," not to persuade myself, but to remind the infinite consciousness within me of its command. In time, money began to flow easily, not torrents at first, but steady streams. Ideas for books, invitations to speak, partnerships that seemed to appear out of nowhere, though now I understand they were always waiting for me at that frequency of recognition. I learned that wealth, in its truest sense, is not currency, it is consciousness. It is the knowing that you are the cause, and the world the effect. That declaration changed everything. It turned my gaze inward, where the true treasury lies. And once I knew the truth, the universe itself began to conspire to prove me right. That was the beginning, the first gate. But what followed next would deepen the mystery beyond imagination. For the second declaration didn't come from a page or a teacher. It came in a dream. The third declaration arrived not in peace, but in turmoil. By then I had begun to taste prosperity. My lectures were drawing crowds. My writings were spreading like whispered fire through the city. Money, once a distant stranger, now visited regularly. Yet beneath the new comfort, something restless stirred. There were nights when I would sit alone in my study, staring at the flicker of the candle flame, and feel a weight pressing against my chest, an unspoken heaviness that prosperity could not touch. I did not yet know it by name, but it was the residue of resentment. Old memories began to resurface, faces of men who had mocked me, employers who had dismissed me when I was desperate, friends who vanished when the coins stopped ringing. The sting of humiliation, the bitterness of betrayal, all of it still lived within me, buried but unhealed. I had thought success would silence the past. But the subconscious does not forget what the conscious tries to bury. It stores every wound, every grudge, every unspoken curse, and then quietly uses them as the blueprints for your reality. It was during one of those restless nights that Abdullah's voice returned to me, as clear as if he were standing in the room. "You have learned to receive," he said softly, "but not yet to release." I closed my eyes. "Release what?" "The past," he replied. "You cannot sail into a new sea while dragging the anchor of yesterday." And then the words came, quiet, yet thunderous in their truth. "I forgive the past, I free my future." I whispered it once uncertainly, then again until the words began to vibrate inside me like the low hum of a distant choir. Forgiveness, I discovered, is not a favor you grant to others. It is a key you turn in the lock of your own prison. Every grudge, every resentment, every "I'll never forget," these are chains that bind the subconscious to patterns of struggle. You cannot command abundance while secretly worshiping your wounds. At first I resisted. The mind loves its grievances. They make us feel justified, righteous, even safe. But the law of the subconscious is impartial. It multiplies whatever you dwell upon. And resentment is a seed that always bears fruit in the form of delayed good, blocked opportunities, and invisible resistance. So I began the inner work. Each night, before I spoke any of the other declarations, I sat quietly and brought to mind those who had wronged me. not to relive the pain, but to release it. I would breathe deeply and whisper within, I forgive you. I set you free, and in doing so, I free myself. Some nights I had to repeat it 100 times before the bitterness began to loosen its grip. But with each repetition, I could feel the invisible weight lifting. Something extraordinary happened soon after. A letter arrived from a man who had once been my fiercest critic, a publisher who had publicly dismissed my early writings as fantasy. He wrote, humbly to apologize, saying that he had reread my work and wished to offer me a new contract. In that moment, I understood my outer world had shifted because my inner resistance had dissolved. Forgiveness is not weakness, it is alignment. It clears the subconscious channels through which divine supply must flow. Money, ideas, opportunities. They cannot circulate through a heart clogged with resentment. The moment I forgave, life began to breathe through me again. People I had not seen in years resurfaced to offer collaboration. Unpaid debts were settled. Old doors reopened. The law is precise. Whatever you release from your heart returns to you transformed. And so I made it a daily practice. Not because the past deserved pardon, but because my future deserved freedom. Whenever my heart grew tight, whenever an old memory tried to whisper its poison, I would pause and say silently, I forgive the past, I free my future. And with those words the chains would melt. You see, forgiveness is the true alchemy of abundance. It turns the lead of pain into the gold of possibility. By cleansing the subconscious of bitterness, you make room for the divine to circulate freely. And where divine circulation flows, prosperity follows like light after dawn. When I understood this, I stopped fearing the shadows of yesterday. They were never there to punish me. They were invitations, reminders that I still had keys to turn, weights to drop, rivers to unclog. That was the third gate, the gate of release. And once I passed through it, life began to move with a new rhythm, effortless, graceful, generous. But even that peace was only preparation for what would come next. For the fourth declaration would teach me something greater than forgiveness. It would show me that prosperity is not something you earn, it's something you become. The fourth declaration came to me at a moment when everything I touched seemed to crumble. Despite the growth of my work, I still carried, deep in my subconscious, the scar of an old belief. The quiet conviction that success could not last. It was the echo of childhood days when my father's efforts ended in loss, when joy was always followed by struggle. A seed of fear had been planted long before I could reason, and though I had risen above my circumstances, that seed had never been uprooted. There came a season when it all seemed to return. A lecture series was canceled without warning. A printing deal fell through. Two of my closest collaborators betrayed my trust, taking ideas we had built together and claiming them as their own. For days I wandered through my study like a ghost. I could still quote the laws of the mind, still speak eloquently about divine supply, but inside a whisper kept repeating, it's happening again. Everything you build will fall. And then one morning as I walked along the Hudson River, the wind sharp and the sky bruised with winter, I heard Abdullah's voice within me, calm, firm, undeniable. Your touch is unblessed because your mind still doubts its divinity. I stopped walking. The city around me blurred. What do you mean? I asked inwardly. Your hand, he said, is the instrument of your consciousness. If your consciousness is divided, half faith, half fear, everything you touch will bear that confusion. The universe does not withhold, you do. Bless your touch, Joseph, and watch what happens. That night I sat again with the parchment, the lamplight trembling like a living thing, and I found the fourth line glowing as if it had been waiting for me all along. Everything I touch prospers. I read it aloud, slowly, the way one might speak a sacred vow. The words seemed to hum in the room. At first they felt arrogant, almost impossible. How could I say that when so many things had failed? But then I remembered. The subconscious accepts what is felt as true, not what is proven by circumstance. And so I closed my eyes and began to imagine my hands as channels of divine energy. Every gesture, every action, every piece of work, every letter I signed, every conversation, all infused with the same infinite intelligence that governs the stars. I began to see my touch not as human but as divine. Each morning before I began my day, I would sit quietly, place my palms over my heart, and repeat inwardly, everything I touch prospers, not as a wish but as a decree, not as hope but as law. I practiced this silently, even as I wrote, even as I walked through the city. If I picked up a book, everything I touch prospers. If I placed my hand on a door handle, everything I touch prospers. If I shook someone's hand, everything I touch prospers. At first it felt like imagination. Then it began to feel like energy. And soon it began to feel like truth. Within a week, the tide turned. The very publisher who had canceled my previous contract returned apologetic, offering a larger advance than before. A man I had never met invited me to speak at a private gathering of investors. That single evening would introduce me to people who would become lifelong friends and benefactors. I realized something profound. Prosperity is not in the things you touch, but in the consciousness that touches them. If your inner state is saturated with faith, everything you engage with will reflect that vibration. Faith, you see, is not belief in something external. It is the recognition that your consciousness is the creative power itself. To act in faith is to act from the knowing that divine order moves through you, that what you set your hand to must prosper, not because of chance but because of law. The law of faith is simple. You do not get what you want. You get what you are. And when you become the embodiment of blessing, everything you meet bears fruit. I began to live differently. No longer timid, no longer doubting the stability of good. I worked with confidence, not because circumstances promised success, but because success had become my nature. The same hands that once trembled with anxiety now carried the quiet assurance of divine authority. Soon, people began to notice. Students said that simply being in my presence lifted their spirits, opened new ideas, dissolved confusion. Businesses I advised began to thrive. Letters came from across the world. Dr. Murphy, ever since I read your words, everything I touch prospers. The principle had proven itself. And in that proof, my identity shifted again. I understood that to say, everything I touch prospers is not a boast, it is an acknowledgement of oneness with the creative mind. The divine never doubts its ability to prosper. The tree does not worry whether it will bear fruit. The sun does not question whether it will rise. The law acts through them effortlessly. And so it acts through you when you remember who you are. When you declare those words with conviction, you reprogram the subconscious to expect success instead of loss, to anticipate growth instead of decline, and life, faithful servant of belief that it is, rushes to fulfill the pattern you impress upon it. The failures of my past dissolved like mist under morning light. Every seeming loss revealed itself as a lesson in faith, every obstacle as a test of my conviction. I had learned the secret of divine touch, that faith once embodied transforms everything it meets. That was the fourth gate, the gate of blessing. Through it I stepped into a new identity, not one who hoped for prosperity but one through whom prosperity naturally flowed. Yet even in the sweetness of success, the next declaration was already waiting, one that would not speak of wealth or work but of wisdom. For what use is prosperity without divine direction? What use is abundance without insight? And so came the fifth revelation, the whisper that would open my mind to a greater intelligence than my own. The fifth declaration came not in triumph, but in stillness, the kind of quiet that feels alive as if the air itself is listening. By then abundance surrounded me. My books were selling, letters of gratitude filled my desk, and the same hands that once trembled over unpaid rent now signed checks with ease. Yet one evening as I sat in my study, a strange emptiness crept in. I had achieved what many would call success, but something deeper was missing. Direction. The mind that once struggled for survival now chased endless possibilities. New ventures, invitations, ideas, all competing for my attention. And in the noise of that abundance, I realized I had lost touch with the very source that had guided me there. I had learned how to receive, how to forgive, how to bless, but I had not yet learned how to listen. It was then that I remembered Abdullah's gaze, that penetrating stillness that seemed to see beyond thought. He once told me, the mind you call your own is but a ripple on the surface. Beneath it lies the ocean of divine intelligence. Until you learn to be still, you will only ever know the ripple. That night I decided to stop seeking answers and simply be still. I turned off the lamp, sat in the darkness, and let my breath slow. Thoughts came and went, questions, plans, worries, but I did not chase them. I simply observed as if waiting for the tide to turn. Minutes passed, maybe hours, and then from somewhere deeper than thought, I heard it. Not a voice, not words, but a knowing the divine mind thinks through me. The words arose as if spoken by the silence itself. I didn't repeat them. I remembered them. In that moment, something shifted. My chest loosened, my mind cleared, and for the first time in years, I felt the gentle current of peace move through me, not because I was doing, but because I was allowing. That night, I slept deeply. And when I awoke, an idea, clear, whole, undeniable, filled my mind. It wasn't something I reasoned out or analyzed. It arrived. It arrived. It was the concept for a lecture, The Power of Your Subconscious Mind. I wrote feverishly, as if my hand were being guided. In 2 days, I had the outline for what would become my most enduring work, not because I forced it, but because I allowed it. That's when I understood the fifth law. True genius is not creation, it is connection. When you align your mind with the infinite, you stop thinking for yourself and begin thinking through yourself. Ideas come fully formed. Decisions feel effortless. The confusion of should I or shouldn't I dissolves into intuitive clarity. The divine mind never hesitates. It knows the pattern of perfection for every situation, but it cannot guide a noisy mind, it can only whisper to the still one. So I began to live by that awareness. Each morning, before beginning my work, I would close my eyes and affirm silently, "The divine mind thinks through me." Then I would let go, no forcing, no analyzing, just trust. And in that surrender, miracles unfolded. Answers appeared before questions were fully asked. People I needed to meet seemed to cross my path effortlessly. Solutions to complex problems would rise like sunlight breaking through clouds. Once I was asked to consult for a struggling business that had lost hope. The owner wanted numbers, strategies, methods, all the language of fear disguised as logic. But as I sat there, listening beyond his words, I felt a quiet nudge within me. Ask him about his father. I hesitated. It made no sense. Yet I followed. The man froze. His father, he revealed, had founded the company and died suddenly, leaving him burdened with guilt and resistance. He wasn't running a business, he was wrestling with grief. When he forgave himself, the business turned around within months. That is how the divine mind operates, not through data, but through discernment. And here lies the secret. Inspiration is not something you chase, it's something you allow. When the ego quiets, intuition speaks. When will surrenders, wisdom moves. Most people drown in the noise of their own effort, trying to figure it out. But understanding this fifth declaration means realizing that your thinking is not the source of your power, your alignment is. You don't need to struggle for ideas. They are already finished in divine mind, waiting for your permission to flow through. So now, whenever I face uncertainty, I return to that quiet knowing. I no longer ask, what should I do? I ask, what is already done in the divine mind? And I listen. It's astonishing how often the answer arrives not through struggle but through synchronicity. A line in a book, a passing conversation, a sudden calm sense of yes. This is the law of effortless guidance, the power that transforms your mind from a limited thinker into a channel of infinite intelligence. To live by it is to walk in grace, no longer fearing wrong turns, for even detours reveal direction when guided by the infinite. That was the fifth gate, the gate of inspiration, and beyond it lay something deeper still. For abundance, forgiveness, blessing, and inspiration all lead to one inevitable truth: gratitude. The sixth declaration would open the heart completely, the moment when I stopped asking for miracles and began living as one. The seventh declaration came as dawn itself. There was no teacher in the room, no parchment, no lesson left to learn, only light. After years of searching, struggling, applying, believing, forgiving, and remembering, I found myself standing at the window one morning, watching the first rays of sunlight touch the earth. And in that stillness, I felt something I had never felt before, not peace exactly, not joy, but completeness. For the first time, I wasn't praying, I wasn't declaring, I wasn't asking the universe for anything, I was simply being, and in that being, I heard, or rather knew, the final truth: I am the law of good made visible, not as poetry, not as metaphor, but as reality. Everything that had come before, the faith, the forgiveness, the prosperity, the divine guidance, the oneness with supply, all of it had led to this final awakening, the realization that the divine wasn't something that moved through me, it was me. I understood now what Abdullah meant when he said, "You will never find God as long as you are looking for him." For to look is to imply separation, and separation was the only illusion that ever existed. That morning, as the city stirred awake, I saw the world differently. Every face in the crowd, every stone on the street, every sound and motion, all of it was the same infinite consciousness expressing itself in endless forms. The divine wasn't hidden in temples or scriptures. It was walking the earth as every human being, breathing in every chest, dreaming behind every pair of eyes. I realized then that all of life is God revealing itself to itself, and that my role and yours is not to reach divinity but to embody it. That is the meaning of the seventh declaration. I am the law of good made visible. It is the final flowering of awareness, the point where belief becomes knowing and knowing becomes being. You no longer practice truth. You are truth. You no longer seek to manifest good. You become the visibility of it. The old Joseph, the man who once scraped coins together to eat, who prayed from fear, who saw wealth as distant, dissolved completely. What remained was something vast, silent, and alive. I could feel it moving through every action, every word, every breath. When I spoke, wisdom came. When I gave, abundance multiplied. When I met others, I didn't see separate souls. I saw the one life meeting itself in infinite mirrors. That is what it means to live as the law of good, to recognize that goodness is not something you attract, but something you are compelled to express because it is your nature. Just as the sun cannot help but shine, you cannot help but bless when you remember who you are. From that realization, my entire relationship with life changed. Work became worship, giving became joy, challenges became divine choreography, ways for the infinite to recognize itself through contrast. You see, good is not a moral concept. It is a state of harmony, the natural order of divine intelligence expressing perfectly in form. And when you realize that you are that intelligence in expression, life ceases to be a struggle for good and becomes the continuous revelation of it. From that day forward, I walked through life differently. I didn't need to affirm abundance. I radiated it. I didn't need to chase opportunities. They unfolded before me. I didn't need to prove or defend truth. I lived it. People would often ask, Dr. Murphy, what's the secret to your calm? And I would smile and say, I no longer believe in problems. I only believe in patterns of good not yet understood. To live by this seventh declaration is to live beyond fear, beyond doubt, beyond need. It is to see God in every face, every event, every detail, to know that even apparent loss is merely life reorganizing itself for greater harmony. And when you reach that state, gratitude becomes as natural as breathing. You wake each morning not to fix life, but to witness the divine unfolding in form through your words, through your work, through the very fact that you exist. I am the law of good made visible. Say it softly now, not as repetition, but as realization. Feel those words move through your chest. They are not about becoming divine. They are about remembering you already are. Everything you've ever sought, abundance, peace, love, purpose, has been the infinite seeking to recognize itself through you. When you stop resisting, when you stop doubting, when you simply allow, that infinite expresses in full clarity as your life. That was the final gate, the gate of embodiment. Beyond it, there is no struggle, no quest, no separation. Only the living God walking the earth in your form. From that day, I understood the universe doesn't reward you for believing. It reveals itself when you remember. And if you truly wish to transform your life, if you wish to walk this same path from lack to limitless abundance, then speak these words not with your lips, but with your soul. I am the law of good made visible, because when that truth becomes the rhythm of your heart, life will rearrange itself to match it. The world will change around you, not because you forced it, but because you finally aligned with what has always been true. And so I leave you with this blessing. May your mind remember its power, may your heart rest in its unity, and may your life, every moment, every act, shine as the visible law of good. If this truth stirs something within you, write it now in the comments as your declaration to the universe. I am the law of good made visible. Let it be your seal, the mark of awakening. And if this message has spoken to your soul, like this video and subscribe so that we may continue walking together through the hidden gates of consciousness. Because the truth is not waiting to be created, it is waiting to be recognized as you. It was then I understood. The words were never magic. They were mirrors, each one reflecting the state of my consciousness back to me. For years I had thought I was using the declarations, speaking them, shaping them, practicing them. But now I saw the deeper truth. It was they who were using me, molding me, transforming me from a man bound by circumstance into a consciousness aligned with divine law. Every declaration had been a mirror, revealing another layer of illusion I had mistaken for truth. When I said the source of my wealth is within me, the world reflected that inner awakening, not because I had conjured wealth but because I had remembered its origin. When I declared I forgive the past, I free my future, I was not changing history, I was cleansing perception, freeing the channels through which good could flow, and when I spoke I am one with infinite supply, I was not summoning abundance, I was recognizing that I could never be apart from it. Each word was a key, not to unlock the external world but to unlock me. You see, I had always imagined transformation as something dramatic, a lightning bolt from heaven, a sudden miracle that changes everything, but the truth came gently. Like dawn dissolving the dark, these 7 declarations had never been about getting more, they were about becoming more. For the subconscious mind is not a servant waiting for orders. It is a sacred mirror reflecting whatever image you hold of yourself. And until you change that image, no amount of prayer, affirmation, or striving can alter your world. The moment my identity shifted from the man who seeks to the consciousness that creates, everything changed. I no longer needed to manifest. I simply recognized that everything around me was the echo of my inner state. The outer world became a living tapestry woven by thought, belief, and feeling. Money was no longer something I earned. It was energy responding to alignment. Opportunities were no longer coincidences. They were reflections of my readiness. Even the people I met carried the vibration of my inner assumptions. This is the hidden law most never grasp. Your life is not happening to you. It is happening through you, and once that truth dawns, your entire relationship with existence changes. Fear loses its meaning, for there is no other force to resist you. Doubt dissolves, for there is nothing uncertain about the law, and effort transforms into expression, the natural outpouring of an awakened being. Abdullah once said to me, "The highest prayer is not, 'God give me,' it is, 'Thank you for I am.'" At the time I thought he meant gratitude, but now I see he meant identity. Every declaration I had practiced was an initiation into divine remembrance. Each phrase lifted me higher, from dependence to dominion, from asking to knowing. And when I reached the 7th, I am the law of good made visible, I understood that the final revelation was not about words at all. It was about being the word. I had become what I had been declaring all along, not a man chasing miracles, but the consciousness from which miracles arise. The truth is simple, yet hidden in plain sight. Your declarations are not meant to convince the universe. They are meant to convince you of who you truly are. When spoken with faith, they do not change things. They change you. And when you change, all things align naturally. That was the turning point. The moment I stopped trying to master the law and realized I am the law in expression. The universe is not responding to your words. It is responding to your state. Words without belief are sound. Belief without feeling is sleep. But when the word, the belief, and the feeling become one, that is creation. And in that realization, the final veil lifted. The seeker became the creator. The prayer became the presence. The man became the law made visible. Now everything I teach, everything I write, everything I live, flows from that knowing that heaven is not a place to reach but a state to remember, and you are already there once you know you are. And then there was only light. No vision, no sound, no voice from heaven, just a quiet, unshakable knowing that flooded my being like dawn spilling over the horizon. It wasn't something that entered me, it was something that had been waiting all along beneath the noise of striving and seeking. That morning, I did not wake up to the world. I woke up as the world. Every movement, every breath, every flicker of light was alive with the same silent truth. The I am within me is God in action. For years I had believed in a higher power, something above, beyond, unseen. I prayed to it, spoke to it, asked it for guidance and blessings. But now, I understood the power I had worshipped from afar was the very life breathing through me. The distance had never been real. The separation had been a dream. The I am, those 2 words, are the bridge between the unseen and the seen. They are the divine electricity of creation flowing through every human heart, waiting only for recognition. It is not arrogance to say I am divine, it is humility to finally stop denying it. The wind outside seemed to whisper in rhythm with my breath. The light on the curtains danced as if it recognized me. And in that stillness, I saw that abundance was not a thing to acquire. It was the natural fragrance of being aligned with what is real. The river does not try to flow, It simply follows the law of its nature. The flower does not beg to bloom. It opens because the sun has risen. And so too, when you awaken to the truth of I am, abundance unfolds without effort, not as reward but as reflection. I understood now why all my earlier striving had felt so heavy. I had been trying to become what I already was. I had been trying to attract light while standing in the middle of the sun. The divine realization is this: you are not a seeker of good, you are the presence through which good becomes visible. Every desire you hold is life calling itself forth through you. Every challenge is the infinite reminding you of your own creative power. And every prayer, at its deepest level, is God speaking to itself. In that awareness, there is no need to beg, to chase, to compete. You realize that all things come to you by right of consciousness, and when your consciousness is unified with the I am, you become a living magnet for harmony. That day I walked through the city as though it were new. The same streets I had once trudged in despair now glowed with purpose. Every face was radiant, every noise symphonic. I could feel the current of divine intelligence moving in everything, even in what others called chaos. A man bumped into me on the sidewalk, muttered an apology, and hurried away, and I smiled because I could feel it even there. God in motion, brushing past himself in another form. That is the mystery of awakening. You realize there is no you in it. There is only the one expressing as all. From that consciousness, wealth ceases to be numbers. It becomes harmony, the effortless coordination of all needs met before they are spoken. Love ceases to be longing. It becomes recognition, God seeing God in another's eyes. Success ceases to be achievement. It becomes flow, the infinite delighting in its own creation. I remember sitting at my desk that night, the city quiet beneath a silver sky, and feeling an immense gratitude not for what I had gained but for what I had remembered. The journey had never been about becoming powerful. It had been about removing the veil of forgetfulness. It had been about realizing that the voice that said, "Let there be light," still speaks through every breath that says, "I am." And in that instant I knew there was nothing left to attain. The I am had become the only truth. Every declaration I had ever spoken now folded back into it, like rivers returning to the sea. Each word, each prayer, each affirmation was but an echo of the one eternal statement, I am that I am. That is the law behind all laws, the life behind all lives, the supply behind all wealth. And when you know that, truly know it, your life becomes the visible evidence of divine mind made manifest. From that day I stopped teaching methods and started teaching remembrance. I told my students, you do not need to reach for miracles. You need only remember who performs them. And as I looked into their eyes, I saw the same spark I had once glimpsed in Abdullah's, the ancient light of recognition. Some wept, some trembled, some simply smiled the way one smiles when the puzzle finally makes sense. For there is no greater revelation than this. The I am within you is not becoming God, it is God becoming aware of itself through you. And when that awareness dawns, lack becomes impossible, fear becomes absurd, and life itself becomes an unbroken prayer of gratitude. That is the divine realization. That is the moment the human dissolves into the holy, the end of seeking, the beginning of being. And so I tell you now, with the love of one who has walked through shadow and light alike, you are not a fragment of creation. You are the whole universe remembering itself in human form. When you speak the words I am, you are speaking the original language of creation. Speak them with love. Speak them with awareness, and life will answer, because it always has. Close your eyes. Let the noise of the world fall away. Let the breath become slow, deliberate, as if each inhale were the universe moving through you, and each exhale were creation unfolding from you. Now feel the quiet rhythm that has always been there, the heartbeat beneath thought, the silence beneath sound. That is the infinite, the divine mind whispering its eternal language through your being. Gently, within that stillness, repeat to yourself, not loudly, not with effort, but as if you were remembering something sacred you had once forgotten. I am the law of good made visible. Let those words ripple through you. Feel them in the space behind your eyes. Feel them in your chest, where breath and life meet. Feel them in your hands, in your spine, in every cell. Each time you say them, Imagine the words glowing softly, like golden light threading through your body, lighting every dark corner, every doubt, every scar left by the illusion of lack. This is not imagination. It is recognition. You are teaching the subconscious, your silent partner, your divine servant, to remember its original state, wholeness. Each morning when you wake, speak one of the 7 declarations aloud, not as a wish, but as truth. Do not strain to believe. Simply feel the meaning of the words for a moment. The feeling is the key that unlocks the door between thought and reality. The rhythm is simple. Speak, feel, release, and then live as if the prayer were already answered, because in truth it is. Faith is not begging the unseen to act, it is walking as though it already has. If fear rises, and it will for a time, do not resist it. Simply return to the rhythm. Close your eyes. Breathe. Feel the divine within you whisper again. The source of my wealth is within me. I live in the end, it is already done. I forgive the past, I free my future. Everything I touch prospers, the divine mind thinks through me. I am one with infinite supply. I am the law of good made visible. Let these truths become your inner heartbeat. Repeat them while you walk, while you cook, while you drift to sleep. Not as mantras to force a result, but as melodies that remind you of your true identity. The subconscious learns through rhythm and feeling, the same way the sea learns the shape of the shore through endless tides. Each repetition carves a new pattern of belief, until your inner world becomes so saturated with truth that the outer world has no choice but to match it. Imagine for a moment your life 6 months from now. You wake each morning at peace. You walk through the world with quiet confidence. You no longer chase, you attract. You no longer plead, you allow. Your relationships flow with ease. Your work feels guided. Your needs are met before they are spoken. You are surrounded by a sense of divine timing. Everything arriving, not a moment too soon or too late. And beneath it all, there is that unshakable knowing, I am the law of good made visible. You are no longer the seeker, you are the source. When you move through life in that consciousness, everything changes. Money becomes movement, love becomes reflection, purpose becomes expression, thirst becomes expression. Every moment, even the quiet, ordinary ones, hums with sacred significance. This is practical awakening. It is not about escaping life. It is about illuminating it. It is about seeing the divine not just in prayer or meditation, but in the smile of a stranger, the warmth of morning light, the taste of coffee, the laughter of a friend. All of it, is the infinite revealing itself through you. So tonight, before you sleep, sit quietly once more, close your eyes, place your hand on your heart, whisper to the divine within you, not as a distant deity but as your truest self. I am one with infinite supply. I am the law of good made visible. And then rest, not as one who hopes, but as one who knows. Because when you live in that knowing, miracles cease to be miracles. They become the natural language of a mind aligned with its source. Now gently open your eyes. Look around you. The light you see, the air, the space, the moment, it is all part of the same infinite consciousness that breathes your name. Walk in that awareness. Live from it, and let your life become the proof that the unseen law is real. If this message has touched your soul, type in the comments below, "My mind creates miracles." Let it be your declaration to the universe. And if you wish to keep awakening this divine power, like this video and subscribe, so that we may continue walking together through the hidden paths of the mind, where heaven is not promised, it is remembered. Beloved one, if these words have found their way to you, it is not by chance. The same power that moves the tides and bursts the stars has guided you here, in this very moment, to remember what you have always been. You are not small. You are not broken. You are not waiting to be chosen by life. You are the one through whom life chooses to express itself. Take a slow breath now, and feel that truth moving through you, from the crown of your head to the soles of your feet, the quiet pulse of infinity reminding you, you are the law of good made visible. Every word you speak, every thought you nurture, every feeling you allow, it all shapes the world around you. So walk gently, speak consciously, love freely. For each time you affirm truth, the universe bends toward harmony. Let your life become a living blessing. When you greet a stranger, let your presence heal. When you work, let your hands be guided by divine intelligence. When you rest, know that even in stillness you are creating, for creation never sleeps. And if this truth spoke to your soul, if something within you stirred, as if remembering its own ancient name, then declare it now, not just to me but to the universe itself. Write in the comments, "My words create worlds." Let that be your signature in eternity, your sacred vow to speak only life, only love, only abundance from this day forward. Because your words are not mere sound, they are seeds. And as you plant them in the garden of the subconscious, they will bloom in the seasons of your destiny. And when they do, when miracles begin to appear where once there was worry, when peace becomes your natural breath, when joy returns without reason, remember this moment. Remember that awakening was never about finding something new. It was about remembering what you already are. So my friend, walk in grace. Let your mind be still, your heart open, your path luminous. For you are not a spark of the divine, you are the divine fire itself. If these words have touched your spirit, if you feel the stirring of truth awakening inside you, then I invite you to join this journey, this unfolding remembrance of power, faith, and divine law. Like this video, share it with one soul who is ready to awaken, and subscribe, not just to a channel but to a new rhythm of living where every thought becomes prayer and every breath becomes creation. Because when one mind awakens, the whole world rises a little higher, and when your light shines, the darkness itself learns to glow. Go now, radiant one. Your words create worlds, your heart moves mountains, and the divine within you, at last, has remembered its name.